Hi, this is Helen from Jupiter's Realm, and in this episode I'm going to be talking about the ingress of Jupiter into Gemini in May 2024 and what that means, and looking at some key themes of this transit, plus a look at Jupiter's trine with Pluto and square with Saturn later this year. So before I get into that, I just want to share exactly when this is happening this year and what could make this more personally relevant for you. Jupiter goes into Gemini on the 26th of May and will stay there until June 2025. Now during 2024, it will move through to 21 degrees of Gemini. So if you have any planets or angles between 0 and 21 degrees of Gemini in your birth chart, or the other mutable signs of Virgo, Sagittarius or Pisces, then you'll be having transits from Jupiter to those planets this year, either a conjunction, a square or an opposition. And so this transit could be more noticeable for you. And if you have Jupiter in Gemini in your birth chart, you'll also be having a Jupiter return either this year or next year, which can mark a reset, rebirth or a new cycle for what Jupiter oversees in your birth chart. To get an idea of how Jupiter in Gemini may be more personally relevant for you, check to see where Gemini falls in your birth chart, what house that is, because the topics associated with that house are likely to be influenced by this transit. For example, if Gemini is on your 10th house, this could relate to work or career or public status, or if it's on the 7th house, it could relate to your romantic or business partnerships. If you don't know what house that is, because perhaps you don't have an accurate birth time, don't worry, the transit is still one that you may be able to tap into and benefit from in a more general way. Okay, so let's dive into what Jupiter in Gemini is all about. Now, in traditional astrology, Jupiter is known as one of the two benefic planets because its nature is aligned with the generation of life through growth, expansion and order, and the other benefic planet is Venus. So when it moves through a sign or it makes an aspect to planets or an angle in the birth chart, it's generally considered positive, and it indicates a possibility for supportive or helpful growth or outcomes or opportunities. Jupiter represents increase, fertility and abundance, higher knowledge and wisdom, belief systems and philosophy, justice and order, faith, and is about having a big picture view. It wants to bring things together in a cohesive way. Jupiter wants to improve things. A transit from Jupiter often brings with it a sense of optimism, advancement, or relief from something that's been taxing, difficult or constraining. It has a feeling of being freer in some way, like you can breathe again and move forward. Now, Jupiter is shifting from a fixed earth sign, Taurus, into a mutable air sign which has more movement. So it could feel like there's a quicker pace or more stimulation to what Jupiter is doing, and it can feel busy. And when Mars moves into Gemini in July, that will also add to this sense of energy, movement and pace. Now this is going to be on the 20th of July for UK, and it might be the 21st for other regions. Gemini is one of the home signs of Mercury and is associated with the intellect, with mental processes, all types of communication, the exchange and transfer of information, learning and teaching, but also invention, commerce, finance and technology. It's about movement and adaptability, and it has quite a playful vibe to it. And Gemini is about looking at the small details, analysing facts. There's a curiosity here, wanting to break things down so that you can understand how they work. It's about planning and strategy and skillfulness, and having options and variety. There's a busyness with Gemini too, and as an air sign there's also a social component. So what Jupiter is doing here is amplifying and expanding these Gemini topics for good or bad, as well as the house topics where Gemini falls in your birth chart. Now I say for good or bad because Jupiter emphasises and highlights things, and so that includes those things that perhaps might not be working out so well. But it does present the possibility for finding help or solutions for these. Jupiter here supports finding new insights, new ways of thinking or philosophies, productive communication, as well as creating new opportunities and social connections, and it brings a sense of joviality and optimism. So this is a great time to explore ways to develop your mind, to improve or gain more skills or knowledge, for levelling up, so to speak, whether that's related to work or education or a hobby. And this might feed into the Gemini house topics in your chart. You might feel inspired to really want to explore a variety of options, ideas and activities, and that could feel really quite exciting or inspiring. It's an invitation to lean into being more adventurous in terms of how you think, or what you can learn or activities you can do, which can ultimately help broaden your mind or your horizons, and to have fun doing that too. Jupiter is also about where or how we find value and meaning. So there may be a lot coming up about how you communicate, share ideas, or gain information or skills in a way that generates a real sense of meaning, purpose, or that brings more value and improvements to your life. It's a good opportunity to get clarity around that and to really define and refine that. And how and what you value in terms of information and ideas that you take in or share, or even technology that you use. And those values might shift during this time as the adaptable, movable energy of Gemini encourages seeking out variety and multiple options. Allow yourself to be curious and explorative, as that can ultimately open up the door of possibilities to new horizons of belief, knowledge, wisdom or opportunities that you might not otherwise be exposed to. Jupiter is traditionally associated with having friendly associations with people that you share common interests or values with, having a sense of fellowship, so to speak, and Gemini is also a sociable sign. Jupiter also represents order and creating cohesion, and in Gemini this can relate to how those separate parts of knowledge or details or ideas contribute to and make sense as a greater whole. So in a social sense, this is about how can you bring your ideas and work together with others rather than separately in order to bring about growth and progress, and to have empathy or compassion rather than discord. Because as individuals, we can have very different, distinct and even oppositional perspectives or ideas with each other. So in a broader collective sense, it's also about can we value each other as individuals and what each individual has to offer as part of a collective, whether that's in our local communities or the workplace or our social groups, friends, etc. Jupiter in Gemini can bring inspiring, visionary, compassionate words or other forms of communication, and a generosity of spirit too. So you may see that coming up as a way that furthers the development of fellowship and relationships, facilitating conversations and discussions that are stimulating, uplifting, or even healing, and creates hope and optimism and gets you moving and interested. I think this theme of meaning and value of information and social collaboration is really pertinent, both on an individual and a collective level, considering the current climate of social media and the issues of things like fake news and AI, and with the number of elections that we have coming up this year. So you may find that some of that might be relevant in terms of how you engage with that, and you may find yourself questioning the value of some of that for your own day-to-day life, for good or bad. Collaboration and social interactions based on a shared vision or value is likely to be an important theme and something that you may feel more drawn to thinking about or addressing, as well as what you value or believe, especially in relation to your Gemini house topics. Since Jupiter is in a sign contrary to its nature, sometimes that can show up as acting in a way that's different to the norm. You may feel inspired to seek alternative ways to approach things. Something else to keep in mind is that there could be a lot of changeability to your belief systems or visions for the future, or more generally to how things are expanding or coming together around ideas or communication. There's this active, changeable quality to Gemini. Gemini is a mutable sign, so activities tend to digress and meander and change rather than moving in a direct linear fashion. Mercury, the ruler, is agile and quick. It's a messenger of the gods who's able to travel back and forth between the worlds of gods and man, and so brings the association of movement, exchange and transfer to Gemini. So there's this busy, fast-paced adaptability and flexibility that planets here exhibit or have to adapt to. So part of the story of Jupiter in Gemini for you may be the process of shifting or moving back and forth between beliefs or values, switching sides, so to speak. You may find yourself changing your mind, your perspective or your philosophy, perhaps as part of a process of growth and finding understanding, truth and wisdom. There may also be a question of how you manage the contrast of the big versus the small. such as how to alternate between having a big picture perspective and needing to have to manage the small details as well. For example, how do you bring your long-term bigger visions and goals to fruition, the Jupiter stuff, through planning, strategy and paying attention to the small stuff that's needed, the Gemini part? Overall, there'll be a need to be flexible and adaptable, and to be okay with having to deal with changeable circumstances and perspectives, especially if that's not your normal mode of operations. I think being rigid is only likely to cause frustrations. Something else to be mindful of is that Jupiter's expansive, enthusiastic quality, whilst that can be really positive and helpful, because it's in Gemini, the sign of its detriment, sometimes that can show up as too much of that. Jupiter brings more, its nature is to increase, but having or doing more, of course, isn't always comfortable or helpful. So there may need to be some caution around big ideas, grandiose statements, overextending yourself, taking on too much mentally or socially. Or you might come up against circumstances where there's overexpansion, exaggeration or hype of some kind that might feel tricky to deal with. There could be information overload, getting too caught up and lost in details, or feeling overwhelmed because of the sheer number of things that you feel curious and stimulated about and that you want to do or learn. So there is a potential here for things to feel scattered, or you might feel stretched thin or feel that there's a lack of depth to what's being done, a sort of jack of all trades, master of none type situation. Now sometimes that can be useful, other times not so much. Of course it depends on the context of the situation. But there is a potential for things to feel messy and confusing. So if what you're trying to accomplish isn't bringing helpful value and meaning, it might be better to put it to one side, take a step back to get some clarity, or come at it from a different direction. It can be beneficial to have some strategies in place to manage time and activities to help reduce any sense of overwhelm. And Mercury-ruled signs are great in terms of planning and organising, so tapping into organisational strategies could be really helpful, for example using planners or apps that help to set and manage tasks in a more focused way. Mind calming strategies or therapies can help for an overactive mind. Or even just reducing the amount of information you take in on a day-to-day level can be helpful, whether that's news or social media, etc. Now shortly after entering Gemini, Jupiter makes a trine with Pluto, so let's take a look at that next. Pluto is at 1 Aquarius, and Jupiter will make an exact trine with Pluto on the 3rd of June, but it's in orb of that and building up to it as soon as it moves into Gemini, and will be staying in the orb of this conjunction until the 12th of June. So this is when the energy of this aspect will be most palpable, namely 26th of May to 12th of June. And then after that, it's in a sign-based trine for the remaining time that Jupiter's in Gemini. So overall, this Pluto energy is going to be underlying Jupiter's journey through Gemini. Now, a trine aspect brings help and support from one planet to another. And with Pluto, this brings some power to Jupiter, perhaps some intensity, and a sense of being able to create change or transformation that empowers the process of expansion and cohesion, and the other themes that I've mentioned around communication and social interaction, etc., and perhaps even technology in your life. You may feel an increased curiosity or need for analysing or investigating facts and information, really getting to the heart of a matter, or to gather or share information with others in order to bring about change or progress. And there are some similarities here between Jupiter in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. Both are air signs, emphasising the social realm and making connections, and the mental realm, communication and technology. Jupiter signifies a forward-moving expansion for improvement and growth, and Aquarius is associated with being future-oriented, with a focus on making improvements for the collective. So there's an underlying mutually supportive theme here of looking to the future to making progress that brings change or new direction for the better, and a focus on social interactions and the exchange of ideas, beliefs and common values as part of that, and also how we act in the collective sense to bring about progress. Now Mars conjuncts Jupiter on the 14th of August, which brings a surge of enthusiasm, drive, focus and energy to an already busy Jupiter, with an impulse to take some kind of action to propel things forward. And that could actually make things feel a little chaotic, but it could also feel like it's possible to accomplish anything and to take a risk in moving forward. But then right after that, as Mars is separating from the conjunction, we get Jupiter running into a square with Saturn. The exact square with Saturn is happening on the 19th of August at 17 Gemini, and then again on the 24th of December when Jupiter is retrograde. But the energy of this square might start to become more noticeable from around the 4th of August as Jupiter starts to build up to this conjunction within a 3-degree orb. Jupiter sits in a superior position in this aspect, so it has a dominant influence over what Jupiter's doing. Now Saturn is in Jupiter's sign, which does help ease some of the tension of this square, because being in Pisces it has reception with Jupiter. But it's still a square, so indicates some friction or unease and a need to make accommodations or to negotiate with what Saturn wants. So what does Saturn want? Saturn is a planet of boundaries, caution, responsibility and wisdom through experience. It could help rein in any Jupiterian excess I spoke about earlier, such as exaggeration, overexpansion or overextension, but it's also likely to slow down events or activities, and it could cause some delays. Saturn also brings in a serious tone to what might otherwise feel more light-spirited, light-hearted or fun. Also, there's a tension here between the depth and gravitas of emotions that Saturn in Pisces can elicit, and that of the quick, light energy and optimism of Jupiter and Gemini. So this could be about how can we get those to work together in a way that's fruitful and productive. It could feel like that forward momentum and pace of Jupiter and Gemini is being restrained, or that things feel a little bit less optimistic and more like the stark light of day. Values and beliefs or plans might be tested around this time, and adjustments or revisions might be needed to be made. You may have to ensure that there's clear thinking about commitments to goals or what you believe or what you hold to be true. There could be some sobering or what seem to be more weighty matters to contend with. Now, whilst that can feel heavier or limiting, like a reality check which knocks back some of that Jupiterian enthusiasm, it can bring through some much needed insight or space for reflection, due diligence or reevaluation of goals or what's happening. For example, what needs to be prioritised? Are your plans grounded in reality? And if not, what actions do you need to take to remedy that? It can help bring more focus to what's really essential, what's really of value, what's ethical, what are the limits of the situation, of ideas or visions for the future, what to let go of versus what to support, so that there's a stronger, more stable foundation for growth and progress going forward. This might involve needing to have some serious, sobering discussions or conversations around that, but taking action to meet these Saturnian requirements can then result in new or better growth or plans coming about. So, overall, it will be a time to engage with truth, clarity and integrity to help make the right decisions and choices going forward. You may need to balance optimism and enthusiasm against the need for practicality and realism, and to acknowledge limitations around hopes or ideas. Both Jupiter and Saturn are immutable signs, so this aspect really requires a willingness to embrace being flexible and adaptable, or to be able to negotiate or compromise moving forward. And Gemini is also about trying different things, trying different options to see what works or what the results are, so that's important too. And both Saturn and Jupiter speak to wisdom. So actively reflecting on past experiences and using available knowledge can really help navigate this tension point. So those are some of the themes that you might see coming up through Jupiter and Gemini this year. On the whole, I think there's some really great potential to tap into new possibilities and opportunities to expand our mind and our ideas, our knowledge and our skill, and our engagement with others through these. And also a feeling of togetherness with others, even when having different viewpoints, and to value that. And I think that could be really stimulating and enriching. As long as we're mindful of not taking on too much and the need to be honest, authentic and adaptable, and to allow ourselves permission and space to step back from the noise of too much news or information. So that's what I have for you today. If you'd like to share your thoughts or experience of Jupiter and Gemini, please do leave your comments. And if you'd like more on upcoming astrology transits, please subscribe either to my channel or my newsletter on my website. And I'll talk to you again soon.